So I've just finished moving house once again, and finally just got the internet connected as well, so I thought it was time to do another follow-up video on this laser cutter. I've had a lot of people looking at the original video I posted when I got this machine, and as I can tell by the comments, it wasn't really that detailed. It was more of a, basically show the machine, show it do something, and that was it. As such, I've had a lot of questions about what it can cut, what it comes with, what it's like, what's the software like, all that sort of stuff. Thought I'd just mention first, actually, I'm filming this on a different camera, so I'm not sure how this will turn out. It's pretty echoey in this room. As you can see, there's nothing in here except for a tired puppy, and that's basically it. So yeah, sorry about the echoes if it's too bad. But I think the first thing I should mention with this machine is while it is a relatively small machine, it's not really something you should plan on getting if you live by yourself in a unit, or you live on the 5th story of a high-rise building or something like that. While it is manageable, it's still quite large and heavy. It's definitely a 2-person lift, and in most cases it probably won't fit in the back of most cars, so you'd sort of assume, well, you'd have to have someone, a mate with a ute or something, you can chuck it in the back. Because they do come in a crate. The crate itself sticks about 10 centimeters off each side, which adds a fair bit of bulk to it as well as weight. I mean, we just managed to get it into the back of, I don't know what it is now, but if you've only got a small car, it might be a bit of an issue, and you might want to look at one of the smaller machines that you can get around for $800 or so. Although I wouldn't really recommend those because excuse me, as I've seen, they can be quite crap unless you do some modifications to them yourself. Not saying this machine doesn't have faults, it definitely does, but compared to those machines it's a fair bit better. So what I'll probably start off with is basically what the machine actually comes with. So obviously you get the machine itself, but you get everything you need to get going basically. So they'll give you just a really heavy duty aquarium air pump. I don't know if this will focus on there, probably not, but it's, what's it say, 80 watts, 88 litres a minute. Probably a bit oversized. I've used smaller ones and they work just fine, so you don't have to get that one that large, just one of the industrial looking ones like that. At least 40 litres a minute or so will do fine. The interesting thing about all the parts that come with this machine, obviously you can get a 240 and a 110 volt version. So yeah, actually be careful that you specify that when you order. If it's shipping from the same country, obviously they've probably checked that for you already, but don't assume. Because what makes it interesting is all the air compressor and the water pump have these standard US style plugs on them. Now these are all 240 volt rated obviously, but most stuff in the US is 110, so you could plug that into 110 and while they'd probably work, they'd probably overheat from the higher current running at a lower voltage and that sort of thing. So yeah, just keep an eye on that. In terms of the machine itself, standard IEC power input. One thing I've had a few questions about actually is this grounding post here. As you can see, I haven't got it connected. Reason for that is some countries, some buildings and stuff, old buildings, they don't actually have a ground in the mains power. So basically you should check all your power cords and stuff should have the 3rd ground wire. Obviously if you've got a plug like this, there's no ground there, so that's when you're going to need to use that grounding pin. So what they say to do with that is just stick a bit of wire in it, and I think they even give you a piece of metal to hammer into the ground even, I can't remember. But yeah, you'll have to set up your own ground. You definitely want to do that because you're playing with, well, the laser tube itself runs at about 15 kilovolts, so obviously if something goes wrong and this case ends up at 15 kilovolts, well, you're in for a bit of a shock. Obviously it's got a little fuse there as well. Apart from that, you get the water pump, which is just a standard aquarium pump. It is one you actually have to put in a bucket, which seems to have a leak in it. It's interesting. But yeah, you just attach the pipe to that, stick it in a bucket of water, and you also get an air pipe. You don't get this air pipe, I bought this myself. The air pipe you get is sort of like a blue plasticky sort of thing. It's the same idea as this. It's like the foldable, style pipe. But with that, once you've actually pulled the pipe out, you can't push it back in again. So after moving, that one got a bit crushed up. So I just went down to Bunnings and bought a box of this stuff. Yeah, just regular like dryer or ventilation ducting tube. And when I want to use it, I just sort of open the blinds here and just jam it in the window down there. If you want to get it yourself, it's 150 millimeters. So that's the little hand fittings that come with the laser one, but that's stuff there. So that's what'll fit on there. And yeah, apart from the pump, the air pump, the tubing, you also get well, in most cases, the rotary attachment. So this is just basically it's a fixed unit, so you can't adjust these at all. So you just sit like a larger bottle or something here, and then you can put, it's a bit big for a pen, but I don't know, something a bit smaller in there. And those just rotate like that. It's got the stepper motor in the back, and just a single wire that I've put extra cat hair everywhere, but yeah, just a bit of blue sleeving over to protect it a bit more. Then what you actually do with this plug, actually one thing I found interesting with these machines is they only use 3 wires for the stepper motor. Yeah, I haven't seen that done before, it's interesting. Basically what you do with that is you've got this plug here, and this is actually for the, what's this, the Y-axis. So when you want to use the rotary thing, just plug that, plug the other one in, and off you go. The reason for that is once you've set the rotary engraver in here, you just adjust this to where it is, and the head itself is the only thing that actually has to move then. So, basically that acts as your Y-axis instead of having this. So yeah, inside the machine, well, first I'll talk about the focusing. They give you a little, basically a laser cut piece of acrylic, and this is what you use to focus. So to adjust the bed height, you just use this here. So you just have your workpiece in here, your nozzle there, you stick that little the little acrylic piece in there, and you just adjust the table down basically until it just sits on it, and then you've got the right focus. If you're cutting thicker material, just drive the focus upwards a little bit, just so the focal point, this thing sets the focal point basically. So if you're cutting thicker material, bring the laser head down a bit so you can't see it goes through anymore. That just means the focal point will sort of be in the middle of the material. Just makes you cut a bit neater on both sides. One thing you'll notice from the original video is I've got this, what do they call it? Egg crate, I think. It's basically used in like ventilation ducts and things like that. So I've just made up a little frame for it. Just got some little holders here on the side to hold it in place, and this is much better than that flat sheeting stuff they put in there originally. Honestly, it might work pretty well if you're just doing engraving with it, but if you're going to be doing any sort of cutting at all, you're definitely going to want to change that out. Alternatively, you can get like gang nails, or just basically something to raise the workpiece off the surface of the flat bed a bit. But since I'm going to be using this majority for cutting, this stuff here just works a lot better because it's got minimal surface contact with the material, so there's not much reflections, and obviously smoke and whatever just goes straight through. So if you look at the back of, say, this thing here, you can sort of see the marks where the laser sort of crossed over the grating, but that's pretty good. Apart from that, I've also added this red aiming laser here, so it's just one of those little reflective mirrors, a little mount I've made up, and that just holds a laser module, standard, cheap red laser. Comes with the fluoro tube, all that sort of stuff. And I'm not sure if I showed it in my other video, but I've also got this LED strip underneath, just for a bit of extra lighting. You don't really need it. So one other thing I'll say, well actually there's a few other things, but basically with most laser cutters, unless you live, you know, somewhere relatively cool, you probably want a water chiller. I live in the tropics, so you know, naturally it's pretty damn hot out there. So, well, I'm in the air conditioning right now, so it's not that bad. But you want to run the laser tube, you know, no more than 25 degrees or so. Once you go above 25 degrees, you sort of notice a bit of power dropping off, and you know, your cuts will get a bit inconsistent and that sort of thing. So this is just an aquarium chiller. You can obviously get purpose designed chillers for laser cutters and stuff like that, but that's all you need basically. Can't remember the rating on this exactly. I think it's like an 1/8 horsepower or something, you know, tiny like that. But just basically set that to whatever temperature you want. It's been leaking a bit, but cools the water down. Just add it into your water loop and off you go. So one of the other questions is basically what it'll cut, how fast it'll cut it, all that sort of thing. First off, it's not going to do metal, not any kind of metal at all. If you're going to look at doing metal, you're going to need to look at spending a lot more money than this. The laser in this is rated at 50 watts. I'm pretty sure it's just a 40 watt tube though. Yeah, you're not going to be doing any sort of metal cutting with that power, not even 150 watts. So one thing I did notice with this machine though is you can actually remove this panel here, and if you want you could actually put a larger tube in here and it'll just hang out the back a bit. So sort of an interesting design. I'm not sure you'd really want to use that. This would be, you know, a bit bodgy hanging out the side there, but I suppose if you wanted to. But in terms of everything else though, acrylic, wood, all sorts of wood. And there are a few materials you just don't want to laser cut. Obviously, best material for laser cutting, I reckon, is acrylic. The cuts are just really, it's not going to focus, but yeah, the cuts are basically, they look flame polished straight out of the machine. They look really good. It engraves really well, minimal smoke. This is some 6mm acrylic here. In terms of speed and stuff, for 3mm acrylic I use 6mm, no, what was it? 6? No, I think it's, no, anyway, for 6mm acrylic I use 6mm per second at 90% power. With most of these machines you don't want to go to 100% power, just because, you know, they tend to overdrive the tube a little bit. So if you limit the power in that way, it's obviously going to last a lot longer. So yeah, with this one here, 6mm acrylic, I use 6mm a second at 90% power. If you're doing 3mm acrylic, I use 10mm a second at 90% power. Generally you just go by material thickness. So if you've got 3mm acrylic, generally the speed's going to be pretty similar if you're using, say, 3mm MDF as well. I mean, it's not a rule, you probably go a bit faster as well, but I just find, you know, for the most reliable cut it's better to just go a bit slower, and then you'll know for sure that the piece is going to pop out once you're done. In terms of max thickness, I haven't really tested it that much. For acrylic, well, I'd say probably you might be able to get maybe a centimetre thick. What you'll notice though is because this lens has such a short focal length, the cut in the acrylic, when you go really thick acrylic, it'll look sort of more like an hourglass shape. So if it does get through it at all, going really slowly, it'll sort of be a pretty nasty looking cut. So in terms of, you know, usable size and thickness, I'd say, you know, 6mm acrylic, probably about the max for that. Wood, realistically probably about the same. Wood does cut a bit easier than acrylic obviously, but it tends to char a fair bit, so if you do use thicker wood you'll probably find it just chars the edges a hell of a lot more than thinner wood. Obviously for most materials you do want to use your air assist, so that's the air tube there. There's actually a little screw on the back here you can adjust the airflow with. For acrylic, sometimes you want to actually dial the air down a bit. You always want to have air on no matter what, just to keep smoke and crap off the lens. But for acrylic, if you want a really smooth edge, just turn the air right down and that'll sort of help melt the acrylic more before it cools it off and gives you a softer looking edge. So as I showed before, this is just 3mm MDF here. and it'll easily slice through that at, what did I say, 10 millimeters a second, 90% power. Probably go a bit faster, like I said, but you know, what's the point? It works well at that, so just leave it at that. The other question I had was, well, actually one thing I should mention is this little panel meter here. It actually displays the temperature. Just turn it on here. Forgot to plug it back in. That would help. It's pretty noisy, but it's actually a little temperature sensor I installed myself. As you can see, I've slicked the Dremel a bit and scratched up the paint, but that just sits in line with the laser tube in there and gives me sort of a readout of the water temperature. Not really needed, seeing as this thing will do the same as well, but you know, it's good just having something on the front panel here. I've got a meter as well that I'm going to put on this side, which is just tube current. As I said, you don't really need it, but it's just good to know. Apart from that, actually, one thing I should mention is when I received the machine, this stop button, the back part of it, if I can show it in here. Actually, one thing you'll notice with this machine is it's very accessible. Like all the compartments just have these little, you know, quick release latches and stuff on them, so you can pop it open and do whatever you want. So that's the DSP controller board there. You've got your two stepper motor drivers, you've got your laser power supply. That's a power supply installed for the LEDs. That's your, well, the main power supply for everything else. But up here, you can sort of see the back end of the switch unit there. That had actually fallen off completely, and you probably can't really see it that well, but there's a little latch, so you can actually just push that back on and it'll click back on. But if you get the machine and you notice this button's loose or it won't turn on or something like that, just check that this button hasn't actually been crushed and the bottom fallen off it. Pop that open and do that. So yeah, like I said, all the compartments have just got these little clips on them, so you can easily just open up the laser compartment, whatever you want. Interestingly, they've put a little key lock on this one here, and all that's behind that is the actual back of the laser power supply, so I'm not really sure the idea behind that, but I'll just tape the keys on top of the power supply there so I don't lose them. Down the side here, you've got two USB ports. From memory, the top one is the one you actually plug into, say, your computer, and the bottom one is what you plug like a USB drive or something into. You've got your main power switch, your laser power switch, water and air pump. I've actually rewired this unit so that I can have the water pump going independently, so you can hear that. Normally when you get the machine, the water pump will only work when the main control switch is on. So I did that just because I have the water chiller here. That means I can turn the water pump on without the machine and just let it cool the water down. Yeah, all the other, like the air pump and whatever, don't do anything unless the machine's actually on. So yeah, the machine is actually quite loud, so you know, you might not want to leave it on the whole time while you're waiting for the water to cool down. So yeah, the only other thing with this people were wondering was basically the software and, you know, what you get or what you hook up the machine with. Unlike the cheaper machines, this is completely USB. There's no parallel port or anything involved, and you've got a control panel. So I'm going to power this machine up. It's going to be pretty loud, so I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to hear. So as you can see, once it starts up, it does its reset and then moves back to the origin. And on here you can see the file number and how many times it's been run, your laser power, your speed. This speed here actually indicates how fast these buttons will move it. So if I just press these here, that's moving at 181 millimeters per second. So you've got, you know, your X, Y. So that's so you can actually position the head anywhere around the table you want and then get it aligned with your material. So what you're going to want to do is every time you start up the machine, basically if you want to run files off the USB drive, plug the USB drive in down the side here. Now I might have this port wrong, I'm not sure. You can go into file, UDisk files. No files, okay, so it's the top one. Knew I'd mess that up. Yeah, so you go to UDisk files, it'll take a second to load. There's a fair few files on there, so might not even load at all. I've annoyed it. But anyway, basically you go in there, it'll have a list of all your files. You just hit enter, it'll copy them over to memory, and then you're good to go. So you can just escape, and then back to here. If you go into file and go into memory files, okay, I don't know what's doing that. I think I must have, yeah, there we go, unplugging the USB drive. So basically this is a listing of all your files that you've already done. So you can actually just go through, select any one of those files at any time. You can run them, delete them, all that sort of thing. So that's if you want to run off the USB drive. As you can see, I don't have a computer here at all, so I've just been running purely off that. And it works just as well. Basically just means I don't have to have a computer in here with it. So yeah, that's basically all you've got to do with the control panel. Apart from that, I'm not sure what's going on here. Let me reset that. Sometimes I found that if you actually unplug the USB drive while it's operating, it can get a bit, you know, a bit annoyed like that. So what you do is you put your material in, you know, set your head up where you want it to engrave on the material, and then you'd hit the origin button here. Basically that means wherever that head is where the actual engraving is going to start. So in this case I've got it set up so the head's top left, so that means the engraving will sort of be in that area there. You can set that up however you want. You could have it so it's top right, you know, bottom left, bottom right, center, whatever you want. Sometimes I change it just because for some pieces it's easier, but it's up to you. Apart from that, you've got like a pulse button here. This just turns the laser on temporarily, so that's good if you're trying to do like alignment. It'll just send a quick laser pulse. Speed, this adjusts how fast it moves when you use the arrow keys, so obviously you can dial this right down, change it to 10 millimeters a second, then you can see it moves really slowly. And that's good if you want to position it a bit better. Min and max power, don't really use that. Probably just when you're engraving a USB file, you can just set your min and max power here if you find it's too low or too high. File, obviously we've been through, start, pause, origin, frame. What that basically does is it'll look at the file you've got loaded in, and it'll just move the head in an outline of where that frame's going to be. So if you want to see something's going to fit on your piece of material, you can just hit the frame button, and obviously it's going to go really slowly, but it'll basically just trace out where it's actually going to engrave. Yeah, that's going to take a while now. So yeah, in terms of the machine itself, that's basically all there is to it. It doesn't come with any dongles or anything. The software itself will basically just detect the machine connected. That's when it'll allow you to install it. Once you've installed it, all you have to do is show it the machine once, and then you can run it again without the machine connected. So basically the machine itself acts as a dongle. You only have to plug it in once. After that, software will just run. The software itself, it's pretty easy to use. Basically you just set up layers in different colors. You see, you can set a line to be black, and that means it'll cut it out. Set a picture to be blue, and that'll engrave it, that sort of thing. So everything works by layers. You can import, DXF files. Basically, well, realistically not every file type, but pretty much any file type you're ever going to need. If you give it an image, obviously it's going to just raster engrave it, because you can't just cut out an image. You need a vector file for that. So if you use like SolidWorks or AutoCAD, something like that, they'll all be able to export DXF files. The machine actually comes with an AutoCAD plug-in, basically. I'm not sure how it works. I use SolidWorks myself, but basically it allows you to hit, well, I don't know what it does, but basically you can just cut out straight from AutoCAD, which is pretty cool. And CorelDRAW as well, but I don't use that either. I just use SolidWorks. So yeah, apart from that, hopefully that covered most people's questions. If not, I can do some more videos on this since people are obviously interested in it. It was a bit of an adventure buying the machine itself. Like obviously no one else I'd really seen done any reviews on it. There were a few around, but not really any specific details. So it was a bit of a stab in the dark, in other words. But in terms of the actual machine itself, I'm pretty impressed with it, especially for the price. Like I said, you are going to want to make a few little improvements, like putting something, a decent bed on it, adding an aiming laser, all that sort of thing. But yeah, apart from that, actually one thing I thought was interesting is this little panel here. Look, they put that panel there purely so you can just adjust the belt tension. That's all it's there for. So that's kind of neat. I originally thought it'd be so you could actually like slip longer pieces of material under here, so you could actually have materials hanging out from the front of the machine. That would have actually been a pretty nifty feature, because obviously it'd still only be able to cut the same area, but it means you wouldn't have to cut up big sheets of material before you put them in. Yeah, apart from that, down the front here, all you've got is your Z-axis belt, your fan, a little water flow meter. Actually, one thing I will note is that water meter, once I got it, had actually somehow it's welded onto the back, so somehow it had actually vibrated loose and was laying down on the floor of the machine. So just double check that, because sometimes it won't actually activate properly. And you will need a fairly decent flow rate pump to actually trigger the water flow sensor. So the one they give you is more than enough, but if you want to get like an inline pump or something, just double check that it's going to have enough flow rate to actually trigger the water flow sensor there. You can't really see. But yeah, hopefully that was a helpful video. If you have any other questions, obviously just put them in the comments and I'll, I don't know, either reply to them in the comments, or if there's enough I'll do another video. But yeah, apart from that, thanks for watching, and I'll be doing some more videos shortly.